All right, now live. Hmm, Headphones are not working right. Check. Nope. Check. There we go. All right. Last word freaks. I've had quite a few this week. Everybody's smarter than me. It amazes me that people who have never done this job don't have a clue. You can tell immediately that they've never done any of this before. Um, I think it's called the Dunning Kruger effect. A couple psychologists figured out in the 90s. He's coming back again with more comments. Maybe he'll come on live. That'll be entertaining. What's up, boys? I was talking about people who know nothing and won't stop talking. Oh, that's just the alert that I'm live. It alerts me that I'm live. What's up, hooking up, Bass? What's up, John? So tonight's topic, well, to start anyway, if you guys want to throw anything up there, I've got a couple things actually I want to touch base on about actual work, but it just amazes me. What's up, Mike? It amazes me the guys that have never managed a pond, never taken a measurement, never done any of this, have the gall really to come on here and tell me all about something that I've been doing for 30 years. What's up, John? You know, I certainly don't. You can't know everything about fisheries management. You know, um, I get questions all the time about the ocean and fish from out west and even smallmouth bass. Got a couple questions this week regarding smallmouths. I can't answer those questions really. I've never managed any fisheries with smallmouth. They don't live in the southeastern United States. They used to. They got displaced by spotted bass. But even then, in the lakes that I managed and the ponds that I managed, there wouldn't have been smallmouth there, even if spotted bass hadn't kind of ruined that for us. Um, I stay in my lane, and I talk about the things that I've done work on. So I don't know. It's just it's stunning, really, the amount of dudes that think that they just I don't know, maybe they can watch videos or watch television and then suddenly they're going to confront me about the things that I say. Um I I understand where they're coming from because I've been there. I was 20 and started school and thought that I was going to walk right through fishery school because I had been a bass fisherman for a long time or a fisherman for a long time. Um, that's not how this works at all. Um, the difference between me and them is in the first, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of those conversations, I figured out really quickly that you don't tell somebody with, a lot of fisheries experience and degrees in the field and years of teaching it their job. Um, I certainly didn't argue with any of the professors once they started teaching pond management and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, Southeast. I'm sorry I didn't see you there, man. I just had the one day. I didn't have a lot of time. I was busy, so I didn't have a lot of time to hang out at ICAST as long as I wanted. I kind of felt like it was smaller this year, though. Did you go last year? I don't think it was quite as big as an endeavor as it was. Um, I did get to meet a lot of cool people. Got to meet the homeless fisherman over at the G Crack booth. That was cool. Marshall seems like a real nice guy. And I got to meet Brian Latimer, and he also seems like a real nice guy. And let's see, who else did I get to meet over there? I talked to a bunch of people. A lot of people were very kind to me, very complimentary about the page, followers and things like that. That was your first year. Yeah. Um, saw Rudd, saw Andrew Hayes from Tackle Talk. Um, Who else? Oh, the guy that does Terrence, the guy that does the Pond Boys. He's followed a long time, and we've chatted on here a few times. And he walked right past me, and I recognized him, but I didn't. You know what I mean? It's like that guy looks familiar, and then once he was gone, I realized who he was. I felt bad about not getting to meet him. Oh, there's a good question coming in already. So well, the funny part, I'll touch on the guys here. They write me books back. That's why I titled this pod the way I did. It's like they think that if they write this long, complex kind of word salad type of paragraph or novel sometimes, that it makes them right. And it's usually a straw man argument. Um, a straw man argument is when you take a fact from an unrelated topic and weave it into what you're trying to describe and to make yourself sound right. And I get a lot of straw man comments. I get a lot of what I mentioned at the beginning, Dunning-Kruger effect, where you think you know what you're talking about, but you actually don't. And you're so stubborn that you just can't listen. Man, I have been dealing with that on YouTube big time. And I don't know, it's just kind of quite entertaining, really. It drives the algorithm. The just like on Facebook or anything about politics or anything else you do on social media, it doesn't matter whether or not he writes me a book about positive, nice things or calls me an idiot or whatever. As long as they're engaging the algorithm and sharing this, the follower count keeps going up. So I'm using these guys, to my advantage. And generally after a few going back and forth a little bit, I'll let them know what I'm doing and that they're being played pretty hard. And it usually embarrasses them enough that that they shut up. But the past week, really, it hasn't. I mean, I still get guys who keep talking, who think, I don't know, they just have to. If they say the last thing, I guess they think they win or something. I'm not sure, but whatever. Keep typing away, coachies. You're only helping. And I don't really let it bother me that much. So Eagles Wing has a question. My take on larger bass. Is there ever a time or a reason to harvest larger fish from pond? Yeah, actually, Eagle. That's why we have a bucket full of 5-pound fish. The pond owner it's actually on the it's going pretty well. The cooler full of there's actually we use an electrofishing boat. Garrett and I did. To harvest fish from several different ponds on the same property. And we just piled them all up in the same cooler and then used all the dead fish to trigger guys to get engagement. So the small 1-pound fish came from one pond to thin it down because he was going to be doing some stocking in that pond. It wasn't stocked properly initially. It already had bass in it. He didn't get a complete kill, or I don't think he even killed it. So he had bass in it. He was going to try to reestablish some bluegill stocking. So he's going to have to go in with like 4 to 6 inch bluegill. And that way if they live through the 1-pound bass, they can begin to spawn immediately. And then, so we spent an hour or two there, just electrofishing the pond, removing the fish out to get as many bass out of the way. So when the stocking truck did come in, those bass had at least a little bit better chance. Now, did we get all the bass out of there with a shock boat? No way, but we did pull, I can't remember, maybe 30 of them or so it was a little smaller than an acre. So we made a significant impact in the numbers of bass that were there to try to get the bluegill population to reestablish with a stocking truck. So there's one reason why we removed 1-pounders. Now you go up to the other pond, and the problem he was having up there, same, little over an acre. He's got a feeder going. He also put trout in the winter, so that he has got a bunch of grandkids that fish. So the problems that he was having was the bluegill weren't really, even though he's got a feeder going every day, they didn't look anything like Sugar Hill Outdoors with a massive amount of bluegill everywhere. And he did okay fishing for the trout throughout the wintertime, but they weren't catching many bass. they weren't catching many bluegill, even though the pond was being fed. He wasn't getting the productivity out of it that he thought he should get. And again, this is just from field experience. He wasn't getting the productivity out of it that he should be getting. And I knew immediately what the problem was, because it's a small pond. It's a 1 acre system. I knew he had a couple of big bass in there, and it ended up being, we got a limit, and we got a 5 fish limit of like 26 pounds. And we took those fish out because it's pretty common when you get a good population of big fish in a small pond. One, they become really hard to catch. They never caught those 5 pounders, 5 to 6 pounders, I guess. They were in that range. Nobody ever caught them. I don't think anybody ever, if they tried live bait, they probably would have got them. I don't think anybody ever tried live bait. At least they didn't tell me that. But sometimes you'll get them on live bait in that scenario. But when you've got a small pond that's dominated by a few big fish, those big fish are very smart and very astute as to what's going on around them in that pond. And a lot of times you won't catch them. So that's exactly why we took those fish out. His grandkids weren't, they weren't doing very well compared to what they could be doing. So, and brings up another good point too. Because he was stocking rainbow trout in the wintertime, he was providing large bass forage. Rainbows grow nice bass. They're easy for bass to eat. They get lethargic when it gets warm, and they're big. They get a lot of protein there, kind of like having gizzard shad. They're also good for big bass. So the point of that is to tell you, if you have big bass forage, you will have bass climb up and get on it, right? That is how you grow big fish. It's kind of like going upstairs. You have to have 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, all the way up to even 12, 14, 15 inch forage. You need that to grow truly huge bass. And when you have that, the bass will go right up that ladder and they'll get real big. When you don't have that, they won't. And that's where guys will screw it up too, because they won't have it. They're like, their pond's not producing 7, 8, 9 pound fish. So what do they do in their mind? Because they don't understand that whole dynamic at all. They go catch 7, 8, 9 pound fish and put them in there. Okay. And I've had questions just the last few weeks about that. And I'm like, don't do it. If you don't have those fish there, you don't have the stair steps to get them there. Something's off, because if you did, they would be there. So you just can't take them and put them in. And that's another thing that guys don't understand either. If you put in it, you can have 1 8-pound bass, or you can have 8 1-pound bass. You can't have both at the same time. And that's what guys are trying to do, is they're trying to throw 5, 6, 8-pound bass in or whatever, but they're not removing fish from the lower end. They're not taking bass out, and they usually need to take bass out anyway. So they've got gaps all throughout their forage base. And generally what happens is that even if you do throw a couple 8, 9-pound fish into a bunch of 1-pounders, they're just eating 1-pound meals. They're eating the other bass, and they're incredibly hard to catch, because they only have to eat every once in a while when they're eating 1-pound meals. So there's just a couple of scenarios as to why you would have to remove larger fish. It just depends on the goal of the pond owner. You'll start, like, even in our 2.5 acre pond in, the Sugar Hill pond, it's already seeing, like, a lot of those kids are catching bass on live bait. They've gone to just hooking bluegill in the back and throwing them in there and catching them that way. They're not biting lures like they did just a year ago. It doesn't take long when you put fishing pressure on a small pond to educate those bass very quickly. And the bigger they get, it's kind of the smarter they get too, the more experience they get. But I don't know. I would say, ideally, in a perfect world, I can grow big bass anywhere. Under an acre, you're asking a lot. It gets to the point bass eat so much, and that's like this clown who keeps writing me is telling me that you put more food in the pond and the bass are going to get bigger. I don't know what I'm talking about. No, you don't know what you're talking about because you don't understand how much that costs. Let's just use threadfin shad as an example. Okay, you buy 10,000 threadfin shad in a load, and that's 35 pounds of shad. Okay, a load of threadfin shad is $1,800. All right, so 35 pounds of fish will grow 3 bass 1 pound for $1,800 if you want to do the math with shad. Okay, the idea of stocking those shad is not that you're feeding those bass those shad. The idea is to try to get a reproducing population of shad that the bass can then feed on over a long period of time. We're not adding the fish because, again, 35 pounds will grow 3 bass, 3.5 pounds. That's 3.5 pounds worth of weight for $1,800. Now, if you've got, say, 50 bass per acre, I don't even know how you would have to have, let's see, $25,000 a month in shad to stock threadfin shad to try to grow 50 bass per acre into, you know what I mean? Like it's a stupid amount of money. You're not going to feed bass and grow them. I've seen guys try it. Private lake owners are not broke, I've seen them break their wallet out. I'm throwing cash at it. I'm fixing it with money. And I tell them, just like I'm telling you guys, don't do it. If you got to set the pond up balanced. If you set the pond up balanced, the fish will grow. No amount of money will help you here. There's a couple things that I can do, a few places that I can nudge it. Rainbow trout is one way, gizzard shad is another. There's a couple little old school tricks that I can pull to help bump it that way, but you still have to have the balance. You still have to have the stair steps there for them to get there, or it's just not going to work. And so I've seen guys spend $10,000 a year on forage, right? And guess what? Their bass don't grow any faster than what Clint's bass are growing right now in Sugar Hill Outdoors. They're still 110 to 120% relative weight. There's absolutely no measurable difference in their fish when they're spending a fortune and the fish that Clint's growing right now. I've never seen it, not once. Again, you can get real technical. You can pull some, random all female bass population or something's really unique out on me to try to like trip me up. But just generally speaking, for an average pond, regular stuff going, you don't want to be, you're just giving the fish hatchery money. And they're not going to tell you I'm not a fish salesman. They're not going to tell you you're wasting your money. Oh yeah. Throw them in there. That's a great idea. They're in the business to sell fish. And for the life of me, for the 30 years, I've dealt with this issue right here where I tell dudes, don't do that. If you want to spend any money, drain the pond and restock it. Let's get a balanced situation going. Let's not play this game where we have to throw forage 4 to 6 inch bluegill, or the last time I bought them, they were $1.50 a fish. You need 1,000 per acre. Again, you're up to $1,500 per acre for decent sized bluegill. Okay. You will get hit over the head in fish costs in a hurry. That's $15,000 in 10 acres to stock at one time. You don't want to be into that. You don't want that. They're going to get into your pocket quick. And again, it's not going to make any difference. You're not going to change anything because of the amount of fish that bass have to eat to grow. And I don't know. I mean, I just try to tell dudes that, and they don't listen. They know more than me. No, Eagle, you're going to want, in that situation, you're describing a stunted bass population. You got a gap. You've got 12 to 14 inch fish, and those fish could be 10, 12 years old. That's the part guys don't get to. When they're stunted at 12 to 14, they're not growing. And then for whatever reason, a few of them get big enough that they can eat those 12 to 14s, and they blow past 3, 4, 5 pounds and go right to 6, 7, 8 pounds, just like you're describing, because they're just crushing 1 pound bass all the time and getting big. So those bigger fish are actually helping you cull the smaller ones. You want to put those back and just cull those 1 pounders, 20 of them per acre. And you do that for about 2 years, sometimes 3. Sometimes you can't cull enough of them. If they've been stunted for a long time, no matter how many you keep, you really won't see good growth ever come back again. That's definitely can happen to you. But I would say that's less than probably like 20% of the time you'll see that. Probably like 80% of the time, if you start calling the 12s to 14s, and it's not a huge place, it's not like 50 acres. Because again, now you're talking about you got to remove 1,000 bass out of 50 acres 2 years in a row to make any difference at all. You can't do that with an electrofishing boat. I don't know too many guys catching 1,000 bass a season. I don't know anybody's got time for that. I certainly didn't. Couldn't even do it with an electrofishing rig. So the smaller the pond with the stunted situation, the easier it will be for you to correct. And that brings up another good point about stunted bass fisheries. Guys will be catching those 1 pounders all day long, and then every once in a while kick out that 6, 7 and automatically assume they hold it up. Oh, look, I've caught one big fish. The pond is healthy, or the small lake is healthy. No, it's not. Okay. You have a gap. You have 12-inch fish and you have 7-pound fish. Okay. Where are the middles? Where's the 3, 4, and 5s? Okay. They're not there. That is an indicator of a problem. Plus, if you're holding up that 1 7-pound fish and saying, look, I catch a 7-pounder every year, whoopity flipping do. In a good pond, you'll catch a 7-pounder every time you go, right? I've literally had 10, 12-acre ponds where the dudes caught 8+ pound fish every single trip, unless the fish were just shut down and not biting and they didn't get a bite all day. They'd be pissed if they didn't catch an 8-pounder that day. I'm talking about ponds that crank out 40, 50, 60, 8-pound fish in a summer. Not 1 8-pound bass a year. Again, our definition of what you consider good and what I consider good are probably way far apart. Let's see what we got here. Hooking Up says he's got a buddy, 3 acres of water. He's got perch, defined perch. That's a wide spectrum Hooking Up. And bluegill, but he's got no predators. He's waiting 3 years, and then he's going to add 20. I would recommend that he adds probably 35 to 40 largemouth bass per acre, and he doesn't have to wait 3 years. He can wait 1. That's what he's going to do is he's going to get after 3 seasons, his bluegill aren't going to grow very well because they're so crowded. He's going to start getting parasites and diseases, and he could actually, waiting that long, he could have about half that bluegill population die because of the parasites and disease. Normally we wait about a year, and if you stock it, you can, again, there's old school tricks. You don't even have to wait a year either. I've done that too, but I would go ahead and I wouldn't wait 3 seasons. The pond, again, the carrying capacity, just like this glass, right? Once the pond fills up with bluegill, there's only so much plankton and so many aquatic insects that they can consume. Once it goes a year and they've spawned, like 1 3-inch bluegill lays 10,000 eggs. So you got a couple hundred 3-inch bluegill spawning in there. They're laying literally millions of bluegill are being born on a monthly basis. So you don't have to wait 3 years to fill it up. You don't even have to wait 1. It will fill itself, and it'll fill itself quickly. Sugar Hill Outdoors, we waited about a year. But there's no point. He's not going to, let's put it this way. He can wait 1 year and then stock the bass. He can wait 3 years and then stock the bass. He's not going to have any more bluegill in the pond because of the carrying capacity of the pond. It can only support so many fish, and it'll fill up pretty quick. So he's wasting 2 years of bass growth doing that. I would also recommend that he stocks bass fry. Don't buy 8-inch bass. Buy the smallest bass available when they first become available in the summertime. The fish hatcheries are probably sold out of them by now, but if he can find some fry this season to put them in there, I would recommend he goes and gets fry. They'll imprint on the system and they'll grow faster because the 8-inch fish are actually going to be a year old, maybe a year and a half old, because they're pellet trained and fed at the hatchery. And I can get a bass. The growth rate you'll get on a new pond setup like that is 1.1 millimeters per day. So if you did the math on that, I can't even remember. Hey Siri, how much is 7.7 millimeters in inches?
The answer is 0.3 inches.
So you get a third of an inch a week times 3. You'll get over 1 inch a month. The point of that is the fish will be way bigger than 8 inches in a year. They'll be 2 pounds in a year, like we got at Sugar Hill Outdoors. They'll be 14, 15 inches long and a couple of pounds in a year instead of buying a 8-inch fish from the hatchery that's a year old. That's another real common mistake that it seems logical. I see where they're going with it. If I stock a bigger bass, it's going to get bigger faster, but it doesn't work that way. But yeah, I would recommend against what the 3-year waiting period and stock the fry, and he'll have a good pond. Josh, I'm not understanding your question, bro. You heard of a 5, I'm going to assume that's acre ponds. What is really... I have grass carp in all of my ponds. There's grass carp and Sugar Hill. They don't affect the balance of the bass and bluegill. I can grow... Well, I mean, right now we're at 26 months after stocking the bass. They were 3 to 4 inches when I got them, and we've got some 5-pounders right now. 2 years in, we'll have 8-pound fish by this time next year. That's easy to do. That's not me being really awesome at my job. That's just doing it right. Yeah, I know. You don't want crappie in those small ponds, man. That's just shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah, you don't want the problem, Josh, with vegetation in smaller ponds is it grows over the whole pond. There's not enough depth. Depth is usually what limits the vegetation growth. So we just manage ponds for no vegetation, and that's again a complete misconception guys have. They think they have to have vegetation. They have to have that aquatic vegetation for habitat, and you don't. I've got 30-something. I've got 35 grass carp in a 2.5 acre pond at Sugar Hill. And again, I've got 5-pound fish in 26 months. There's virtually no vegetation in that pond. I've got so many carp in it because they irrigate out of that pond onto basically a commercial tree farm. So we don't want weeds clogging up the pumps so they can keep the irrigation going. We don't want to put chemicals in the water to control any kind of weeds, again, because those chemicals would affect what they're pumping up onto their trees. And then thirdly, I don't want any weeds just simply because if you let it get crowded with weeds, it gives the bass too many places to hide. Well, one of two things will happen. It'll give the bait fish too many places to hide and the bass will starve to death, or depending on the type of weed, a lot of times you'll also see it stunt with like 4 to 6 inch bass because the bigger bass can't hunt the bass fry in the dense weeds. And you just end up with way too many small bass that eat everything that's kind of trapped in those weeds. That it creates like this micro environment where the little tiny bass just dominate all of the fish that are born or eaten before they ever have a chance to grow. And it just stunts the pond out really bad with largemouth bass. So it's always better not to have any kind of plant life in a pond. You don't need it to grow. Again, bass grow because of the balance of the fishery, not because of the habitat or all that. That's just different. It's a completely different thing. I see that too. Guys get their pond gets stunted with 1 pound bass, and the first thing they want to do is go sink a bunch of brush piles. And I'm like, that's not going to change the balance of the fishery and get your bass growing again. That's going to concentrate the bass you have to one area and make them easier to catch. And that tricks guys into thinking that they've, accomplished something with the growth of the fishery, and that's not affecting the growth. It's affecting maybe increasing your catch rates, which is giving you bias into thinking you've done something to help the health of the fishery, but you haven't. When you measure those fish, they're still a poor relative weight. They're still not growing past 1 pound. Sinking a bunch of brush in the pond isn't going to make the bass bigger. Correcting the balance of that fishery will. Oh, yellow perch. Yeah, that's a problem. Those are predatory fish. He's probably going to end up with probably like 50% bluegill and 50% yellow perch. I'd dump it again. I mean, he doesn't even have any bass in it at this point. I would drain it, kill everything in it, and stock it with bluegill only. Yellow perch are kind of going to behave like crappie. They're going to eat your bass fry. They're compete with bass for food. They're going to limit your bass growth, I guess is the best way to put that. I'd rather have straight bluegill in that situation and no perch at all. Yeah, he's got perch eating those bluegill. So, I haven't managed. Maybe if he's in a situation where the yellow perch didn't survive, he's not seeing too many of them, I wouldn't worry about dumping it. But if he's catching a bunch of small yellow perch, that's not the forage base I'd like to see. Yeah, he's wasting his time and doing it wrong. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. He's not doing that right, and he's not going to get good. He's not going to get anywhere near the results I'm getting. That will help him, but see, the problem is he's going to stock 3-inch bass, and then the yellow perch are going to eat them, and he's not going to have any. That's why you don't want him in there. And instead of stocking 20 bass, he's going to need to stock 200 to try to get the survival. Maybe he gets too much survival. Maybe he doesn't get enough survival. He's got an uncontrollable factor due to another predator. You see what I'm going with that? So if he didn't have the yellow perch in there, he could follow the simple steps and everything would work out for him. Now he's got an uncontrollable variable with an additional predator in there, and he's going to be playing the game where, he doesn't know what's going to happen. It might work out for him, it might not work out for him, and as a professional, I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be charging someone money and not know exactly what's going to happen. But adding the perch like that, he's created an uncontrollable variable that's going to cause him problems probably. I'm assuming we're talking about stocking. I stock about, it depends on the goals of the pond. I mean, if we're talking about growing largemouth bass on 5 acres of water, 35 to 40 per acre is what I stock. I stock 1,000 bluegill per acre, and I usually stock at least 10 grass carp per acre. You can Google all that stuff, Josh, some just basic fish stocking. Excuse me. The book will tell you 50 bass per acre. The book was also written like in the 50s when people actually kept bass. It'll actually tell you on fed or fertilized ponds you can stock 100 bass per acre. But I think when they wrote that book, they were factoring in that people put everything they caught in a cooler back then, whereas now it's completely the opposite. So I've just found out pretty quickly, actually, around the late 90s, that 50 bass per acre stunts out pretty quickly. If you shave that down, we went with like 42 bass per acre in Sugar Hill, but we lost almost 6 or 8. I think we're down to, of the originals, we're probably at the 39 or 40 original fish. You get death, you get birds and hook mortality and stuff like that. Now, of course, we've got reproduction coming in now, so that changes everything up. The bass will spawn after their first year. It doesn't take them long. to get to spawning. So you normally need to be harvesting bass and not worrying about stocking them once you do the initial stocking. Yeah, relay that all to him, man. And I would, before I spend any more money on it, I would probably go see it with the yellow. If he's catching a bunch of yellow perch, I would dump it and start it over again and do it right. It's a pain. I know it's like a gut punch for a lot of dudes, but you could drain that pond, eradicate the fish in it, let it fill back up, put your bluegill in it this year, and stock the bass in it next spring and be fine. I would also have him put a few red ear in there. They crack freshwater snails, and the snails are host to a lot of the parasites that get on your fish. So they're the only kind of fish that can extract that protein out of the snail and convert that to bass, forage. So that's good. You're kind of leaving out a piece of the food chain if you don't put red ear in there. But you're also setting yourself up for having a lot of parasites and red sores and things like that on your fish. Your fish could be a little bit healthier with a red ear population too. So I would ditch the yellow perch and add the red ear. 5 acres is pretty small, but you can grow some nice bass in a 5-acre pond. Once you get under about 1 acre is really when you're pushing your luck trying to grow largemouth bass. They just eat so much. The pond physically under 1 acre can't physically hold enough fish to grow very many big fish. They'll literally just eat everything in it. But 5 acres is decent. I've grown some really nice fish in 5 acres. I mean, Sugar Hill's 2.5. It's got some nice fish coming up in it. We'll get some decent ones, but you're definitely limited. I would say for, consistently producing 10 plus pound fish, 20, 25 acres, that's where you kind of reach the point where you've got enough water that you'll really, have a good chance of having a really solid double digit fishery. I'll probably get one. I'm hoping to get 1 or 2 over 10 out of this little pond, but it's really hard to do. The smaller the pond, the harder it is. Again, because they eat so freaking much. You just don't have enough. You don't have enough fish per acre. You need acres and acres and acres of water, and a low bass population. So those acres of water are full of forage, much the same way I'm describing to hooking up. You need a massive amount of forage with very little competition. Preferably in ponds, we want no competition. We just want bass only predators. And again, now we got something we can control. It works like a seesaw. Then we remove bass, the bluegill go up. If you have other predators, crappie, yellow perch, green sunfish, so on and so forth, it's not a simple system anymore. You could remove bass and have the yellow perch go up, or have the crappie go up. You have a completely different species move into that space instead of the bluegill moving into that space and making it easy. You have some other kind of fish moving into that space. And then especially crappie are really hard because you can't usually keep enough crappie to make any difference. What's up, Frank? Yeah, Shan is my full name. That's it. Just Shan. Oh yeah, bass will eat perch, but perch will also eat bass. Again, it's not a big. If it's a bigger lake, I wouldn't be so worried about it. But if you're talking about a small pond, we just don't want the competition. It's exact same principle as the crappie. You've got fish competing with one another in a smaller environment, and it adds a variable that's really kind of uncontrollable. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, you would think that like a pond full of stunted crappie, right? Like they're hand sized, they're paper thin, they look like a bass would just smoke them. But again, I've only seen it about 800 times. you've got a pond completely full of what looks like good bass forage, but your bass are down there at like 70% relative weight and starving to death because crappie are obviously really good at avoiding bass predation. I think it's the schooling tendencies and the way they tend to pack up and stay away, get out in open water. I've literally turned the electrofishing boat on so many times and just seen what looked like you would think, oh my God, the bass are going to be huge on all these crappie, and they're not. That's just one example. And I don't really have that much experience with yellow perch. They might not be as bad as crappie. We have a few in North Georgia. I've personally never seen them overrun a pond, but they are predatory. I mean, they have teeth, so they're going to be competing with your bass, and you're not going to get the same growth rates that I'm getting because you've got a competing species in there. That's a good question, Eagles. They don't really concern me as much. Of course they're going to be eating what bass eat, but in South Georgia, we have a lot of chain pickerel, and there's a little pickerel called grass pickerel too. And I've never gone to a pond and been like, oh God, the pickerel have run this thing over. Generally, where you see a bunch of pickerel, there'll be a bunch of crappie. And see what it is the crappie spawn earlier in the spring than the bass, and then their fry eat all the bass fry out of the pond. So you lose bass reproduction. You kind of lose your bass population to them. And then without the bass being there, the pickerel will kind of creep in there with them. But in the ponds that I've seen, which is limited, but on the ponds that I've seen pickerel with no crappie, they're usually like really big. There's very few and far between pickerel that are really big. They just got lucky, and I think most of the pickerel get eaten by the bass, when there's not crappie to disrupt the whole show. So I don't really get into a panic attack about chain pickerel in a pond. I definitely feel way worse about the pond if you gave me a choice between pickerel and crappie, I'll take pickerel. I don't think they affect it as badly, at least based on my experience. You're right about that, Josh. People mess up with crappie. Go fish for them in the river. Yeah, 4-pounder. Yeah, dude. 32 inch. That's a barracuda. I missed that one. I'll have to go back through my stupid DMs, man. They it's not the best for trying to communicate with people on social media. I'll have to go back through and check that out. But that's a freaking northern pike, dude. Good God. Yeah, I would agree. You want your crappie coming out of rivers or bigger lakes. Bigger reservoirs, again, different dynamics, different situation completely. You can have that's where guys make their mistake. They want to stock their pond like a major reservoir. They automatically assume that diversity is better in a pond because the lake is so diverse that they need diversity in the pond. And that's where they really mess up, because you've got rivers running into these major, you're not going to keep the competing species out, for one. It's very rare to find like a bass bluegill only, pond or lake that's 1,000 acres. That's almost unheard of. I've seen a few, but it just doesn't happen because they're fed by rivers and all kinds of fish get in there. But that's fine because it's a different situation. It's not a pond. It is a big impoundment, and those are different. You manage those differently. I am looking forward to seeing that fish, dude. That thing is ridiculous. Did you send that to the Facebook? Is that where that one went? I don't keep a track on Facebook as much. Facebook's just a waste of time, really. That's good information to have, Drew. He's got yellow perch in 5 acres, he says, and he's not overrun with yellow perch. I would definitely harvest them. And you doing all largemouth 12 inches. You can do 10 to 12s. You don't anything under 10 inches, like bass under 10 inches are just forage for even for a 13 or 14-inch bass can eat an 8 or 9-inch bass. Um, you don't have to keep them, but 12 inches, 12 to 14 is usually the slot that I put on my bass. But yeah, that's good information to have. He's got it worked out. And you'll see the same thing too in some ponds with crappie. You'll go in there, especially when the ponds are new. Like in the first 10 years, people put crappie in there and they'll grow some nice crappie and they'll still have some decent bass. Um, and again, kind of a straw man argument where you're taking a fact. Well, I have a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old pond and I've got crappie and bass and it's fine. Yeah, okay, but come back and talk to me in 15 years. You know, give it some time, and it generally goes to screwed up. And of course, every once in a while, you'll come across one that does go for 15 years and doesn't seem to really. You still have some pretty decent crappie fishing, and you still have some pretty decent bass growth. But I've never seen one like the ones that I'm talking about, where you're going out and whacking 8-pound fish like left and right. That doesn't have a crappie population in it. So it's crappie are always a throttle limiter, whether they totally destroy it or just slightly keep it back. Like I had one guy, he did everything, again, plenty of this, and he's wanting big bass. And I said, drain it. And he wouldn't drain it. I absolutely would not drain it. He would put thread fins in it every year. He'd $3,000 worth of threadies in there. He would do about the same amount of money in rainbows in there. He had guys going out and harvesting the crappie, like 10, 12, 15 boats. They brought in the party barge. They have crappie tournaments in the springtime and just whack crappie over the head. He had bluegill stocked every season. He had feeders going all year. He caught 8 to 9-pound bass all the time because of the way that he stocked it, but he never busted 10 pounds. And he wanted to know why. Well, why can't I get this to do it? Why? I want to know why. He called me on a carpet, why? And I said, well, you remember about 6 years ago when I told you to drain it and get all the crappie out of it? You left a throttle limiter on your pond. And I mean, it was 9 pounds, 15 ounces, but it wasn't 10. He never, in the 10 years I managed that pond, it never broke DD. So you tell me why. I mean, we just come full circle on that whole story. This dude had 100,000 acres of land, one of them kind of dudes. That pond never produced a 10-pound bass. It has a bunch of 9s, a bunch of 8s, more 5s than you could count. It never busted 10, and it had crappie. I said, man, I did everything I can do. That dude passed away. I don't know whatever happened to the pond. Facebook? Okay, cool. I'll check it out. Yeah, yellow perch are good to eat. I've had that a few times. I think hooking up. I think the crappie. It's just they get a jump. It's earlier in the spring, and it's almost a microscopic fish war. It's not the adult crappie that I'm even talking about causing the problem. If you think about it, when fish spawn, sunfish especially, they spawn by the bajillion. They throw off massive spawns, so you have literally millions of fish being born. Those millions of predatory fish are born and they're eating zooplankton. Well, that's exactly the same food source as bass that are being born are going to be feeding on. So you've had your zooplankton bloom picked over by crappie before the bass are ever even born. Right. So when the bass are born, they're tiny. They're, like I said, they're almost microscopic, but the zooplankton's gone. So they just starve in a day or two and die, and you never see a bunch of dead bass because they were so tiny to begin with. You just don't even see them die. On top of that, those crappie fry that were say 10 million are now they're down to 1 million because their parents have been eating them. Any bass or any other predators have been eating them, but you've still got 1 million little tiny crappie all around the edges that are now big enough to eat the bass fry that are just being hatched out. So again, I'm not even talking about fish that you can catch with a hook. you're losing at almost a microscopic level. And again, it's just stuff that just is going like this on most of these guys. They don't understand the biology of this stuff and how it works. So that's where your problem lies with crappie. It's in the reproduction. So what ends up happening is that all that crappie reproduction gets eaten up by all the other crappie in whatever batch you happen to have. And you literally don't see it. You can see it this way. I can tell you this, like just from doing it a bajillion times, you put an electrofishing boat in to like Sugar Hill Outdoors and you go around that pond and you look at the numbers of bluegill and the numbers of forage fish that are coming off, and it's ridiculous. And then you go across the street to a pond that's got crappie and that numbers of forage fish just plummets. Like, it's almost like, where are the fish? Like, we've had the shock boat on for 10 minutes and haven't even seen any forage fish. The crappie depleted so quickly, so badly that it is really noticeable on the lower end, like 1, 2, 3 inch fish. It's because they're being eaten before they even have a chance to become 1 inch. The crappie are excellent predators is what the problem is. They're too good at their job. Oh, I appreciate you hooking up. Yeah, I mean, again, I just try to tell the truth. Just be blunt about it. I don't try not to be rude to anyone, certainly, but I don't want to sugarcoat it or try to make it sound like something that it's not. There's too much of that going around anyway. And again, I'm not a fish salesman. I'm not here to sell you a bunch of products to keep my bills paid. You have to understand, even if you're trying to run a halfway honest pond management business, people are going to call you and want a product. And I can tell them, like crappie. And I never stocked a crappie. I'm not in the business of screwing people's ponds up. But here's what I ran into. Guy calls me up, says, "Hey, I want to stock crappie. How big's your pond?" 5 acres. No, I don't do that. And I really don't recommend you doing that. Yeah, but I really want them, and I'll harvest and I'll do this and I'll do that. And I'm special. It's me. So it's, science doesn't matter. And I'd tell them plainly, no, I absolutely will not do that for you. And you know what they did? Did they take the advice? Did they get the hint? Absolutely not. They just picked up the phone, called the next guy down the line who's more than happy to go make a sale. And they'll go right behind your back. I had clients do that to me, go behind my back, insist on stocking crappie in their pond, we are at this level, what we're at right here, 3 years in at Sugar Hill, getting this awesome growth. The pond's about to be set up to be perfect. And then the next thing you know, they've gone behind my back and they put crappie in the pond and not even told me. I find them in the electrofishing survey. How'd the crappie get in here? Well, I wanted them, so I called another guy. I still want you to manage the pond and everything, but I wanted crappie. It's my pond, so I'll just, I'm not going to listen to you. Like, all right, your pond's going to suck like everybody else's. Yes, I would say 100 acres or bigger on that. If I could keep crappie out of everything 100 acres or smaller, that would be the move. I've even seen them like the same patterns in a 2 acre, 3 acre, 5 acre, 10 acre pond that crappie create. I've seen in 150 acres of water. Like, the data looks the same. You've created this 78% relative weight, 82% relative weight bass, 85% relative weight bass. Maybe every once in a while you pull a 90% relative weight bass. And you got crappie that are all like 5-6 inches long, and they're just not quite big enough to eat. And occasionally a decent one will kick out, but you got kind of a whole bunch of crappie about like that. You really don't even feel like cleaning. And you've got bass that aren't up to their potential. And again, it's just a pattern you see over and over and over again, in the data. I don't know if Cheek's on here tonight, but Phil Cheek's gotten really good. He's measuring, and like, you could literally, like, if you measure it and write it down, you can tell by the relative weights of the bass. Are your bass coming back 75 to 80, 85 at top end? Like, you're seeing You catch a bass and it's 78. You catch a bass and it's 82%. You catch a bass, it's 80%. You catch a bass, it's 78%. You got crappie in that pond. I don't even need to see I don't need you to do it. Just show me the data, show me the numbers. It's a pattern that repeats itself. And, you try to explain that to guys, but you get a dissertation of word salad usually back in return. Oh, I caught an 8.5 pound bass in a pond of crappie. Well, yeah, I've shocked a bunch of 8 pound bass up out of ponds of crappie. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean one flipping thing. It's funny how guys try to relate. Like one guy, I don't even know who it was, came on Instagram, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, was talking about how I made a post about turtles and how their metabolism's slow and they don't really affect a healthy fish population that much. And the dude's like, oh, well, all these half-acre ponds that are full of turtles sure don't have any bass. Well, yeah, no kidding, because we just stated here you don't grow too many bass in a half-acre pond. Ponds under an acre don't grow bass very well anyway. Okay, that has 0% to do with the turtle population and everything to do with the fact that it's been scientifically proven it's really hard to grow decent bass in a pond less than 1 acre. So again, a straw man argument. You're taking a fact and somehow manipulating it to try to win an argument that doesn't pertain. It's ridiculous. I'll scroll back real quick, make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. We're going pretty quick there. And I'm getting better views if I keep them a little bit shorter too. I don't think I'm going to roll for 2 hours tonight either. Cut it off hour and 15 or something like that. Yeah, see there, now you're getting up into, like I said, you're over 100 acres. You've moved definitely, up into, I think, I forget, it gave it to us in hectares, and I don't even know what a hectare is anymore, but it's like 50 acres or something. I think book knowledge considers pond, lake, whatever. It's just terminology. But, you're up into the solid, pretty big lake at 155 acres. And I would expect you're not dealing with a pond anymore. You're in solid lake range at that point. So you're having a difference. And again, I've had that happen to me too. I'm talking about ponds and how crappie negatively impact ponds. And then I've got guys telling me about this 1,000-acre lake that they fish. Well, it's like, well, yeah, you're comparing apples and oranges. We're not talking about the same things at all. Trying to say, well, crappie didn't bother it there. Well, no kidding. It's not what I'm talking about. So yeah, I've seen plenty of 155 acres of water that produce decent crappie and decent bass. Of course, if you had that 155 with no crappie, there's no telling what it would do. They're still limiting. There's still competition, and I only know that. And again, it's only a handful of places that I've even seen that. Not many people own a 100-acre lake. A couple, but not too many. And then out of the not too many people who own them, not too many you can't keep the crappie out of them anyway. So, but the ones that I have seen, it's stupid. The fishing is stupid. Like Mexico, you can't believe how good the fishing can be if you just follow those simple steps. I don't think I missed anybody. I'll wait 1 second and see if anybody comes along, and then we'll just shut her down. I got to be up early in the morning anyway. So I don't know, boys. Like I said, all you can do is tell the truth about your experiences and hope people will eventually listen. And I really hope that, I don't think I'm going to see much difference in my lifetime. I've tried real hard to educate as many people as I can. And as far as the general public goes, I'm not telling people what they want to hear and they don't follow, you know. But I've noticed, some other bigger influencers than me are kind of grabbing it and getting some traction with the fish hole harvesting bass thing. And it's starting to become, it's not just me talking about it anymore. There's some guys out there talking about it. So hopefully one day the general public will kind of understand what's going on and be more on the same page. And I certainly hope the younger guys that are coming up as fisheries professionals can take, the stuff. I get compliments in DMs and stuff from guys telling me, "Hey, I'm taking that from you. I'm taking that from you. I'm using that to." I was like, "Do you have it?" That's why I did it. If today's my last day, I can say at least I contributed in as best I could to the health of our bass fisheries with my experience, and pass that along to younger guys who can use it, who are going in to be professionals, maybe make their lives a little bit easier. It certainly was not easy for me. Hey, thanks, man. I think I gave you the same one, didn't I? Alex has got flipping kicks there is got a pond that I've been consulting with him on too. Again, 2.5 acres or so. And looks like his is coming around pretty nice. Fish are feeding well. He's catching bass around the feeder, and he does have crappie. Nice. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that a lot. Appreciate all the support you guys give me. I just wish it was more so we could, I don't know, just get it going in the right direction, and not have so much misinformation still. These conversations are so old for me. That's why I'm good at engaging these stuff, because there's no questions that any of these guys are throwing at me here that I haven't answered a bajillion times. So I can make it more concise, I can summarize things quickly because I've done it over and over and over again. I can make things very concise. And that's what the kids from school are getting, is that condensed version of a complex answer in a more simple format. And please take it, use it, I knew it would happen. And I guess the only thing I ask for in return is credit for my work. But there's a lot of people taking this stuff and running with it and not giving credit, and that's okay too. Yeah. It's not. I don't know. I don't own disinformation. This is, how do I put it? I believe in open source information. It does a little grindy, you kind of give it the side eye, when you hear your exact words being used on somebody else's videos and stuff. But at the same time, you got to expect it. It's just the nature of the beast. It's okay. I would rather have somebody take it and use it and teach people the right stuff than continue down this path of misinformation nonsense where guys are just making up whatever. They get a platform and then just say whatever they want, and it's not true. That drives me crazy. Anyway, we're past an hour, and let me do one more quick check, make sure I didn't miss anybody. Guys, throw something up there if you needed anything. No, I think we're good. Oh, thanks, Eagles, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, there's no point in beating around the bush. If you know it, you know it. And again, I don't want to be rude or offend anyone, of course, but at the same time, I also don't want to, we live in a society where if people aren't just catered to in the most gentle way possible, they flip out. And that's kind of what's happening on YouTube a lot. These guys, you're not telling people what they want to hear, and they just lose it on you, they, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, straightforward. That's what I try to be, man. Just cut the nonsense out of it. Let's deal in the basic facts. And then once you're there, once you see it And that's the thing, man. Once you see this one time, I'm so lucky to have Clint and have the pond that we can actually see the results, in 26 months, in 36 months. We were able to track it out over a couple of years. Once you see it, it clicks, and you'll be able to spot the dudes who are kind of full of it. I am telling you what, man, you got that one right. I don't want to say anything. Sometimes these lives will get flagged for whatever reason, and I really try hard not to use bad language, or I don't know why sometimes though the lives, you'll have like on the thing, it'll have like a little green like money on my end on like the studio part. If the money symbol is green, you're good, and they're putting advertisements and you're making money on your content. But if it turns yellow, you get some kind of AI warning like your content isn't suitable for advertising. And I just don't see the point in doing all this and not having some advertising revenue coming in. So I end up deleting those off. So hopefully this won't get flagged because I don't think I used any bad language tonight, or I don't even know. Maybe it's just if you string certain words together, because there were some that I didn't use language at all, but they still got flagged. So I'm not, AI is kind of weird anyway, but whatever. Oh, Montana's got one off topic. When stocking 1 to 3s, how long till they begin to feed? You stocked 8,000 in an 8-acre pond. Well, your good news is copper nose. Usually, that's the reason why they use them. They usually take the feed pretty quickly. I wouldn't expect longer than a week or two, and they should be on it pretty hard. That's the good thing about copper nose is they usually take feed really readily. If you're having trouble with them feeding, could be the time of day. Try them early in the morning or late in the afternoon, or if you're feeding twice a day, both. Make it that earlier time. They'll usually be a little more active around those times. Try not to feed them in the middle of the day. But copper nose should. You can also go to, like, for your first couple times, go get pellet, the really small fingerling pellets. That'll help them too. If you're feeding the bigger, like cheaper, like floating 32% feed, it's just too big for them to eat. You can go, it'll be higher protein. It's going to cost you a fortune, but it'll be a lot smaller pellets, and they will sink. So they'll go to the bottom, and that'll give those bluegill an opportunity to kind of smell them out and pick them off, pick it off the bottom. And it's a much smaller pellet. Go with a fingerling feed. And then you can transition to larger feed, a little bit later. But that's normally what I do. I start them out with a high protein fingerling feed and then transition over to larger feed as they get bigger. Yeah, no, it's not gray. If you don't you have to, that's another funny thing too. You have to turn on the monetization for these lives. Like if you don't go in there and tell it to monetize, it won't, it'll just sit there. And that's not what I mean. I mean, I turn it on, it's green for a few days, and then the dollar sign turns to yellow. And when you click on it, it says, this isn't suitable for, this has got a flag for marketing or for advertising or whatever. And it's like, I just delete those off. I'm not keeping them. If they're not making me any money, I'm not keeping them. Yeah, I know, hook and eye, whatever. Who the heck knows? Clint has been all over the place with his Alex. It's he did that high protein fingerling feed for a little bit longer than I normally did. He's used the Aquamax like you're using before, and a couple different brands, really kind of what's available, in what's local to him there. I like the Aquamax. If you can keep getting the Aquamax, that stuff works really good. You just keep doing what you're doing. It's fine. It's probably all the same stuff anyway. There's probably only 2 feed companies in the whole country anyway. So, I don't think it makes that much difference. Oh, you're welcome, Montana. It's no problem. Thanks for following. All right, boys, I'm going to knock it off and get some rest. I'll be up early, but I'll be back next Sunday and get your questions ready, and we'll do it again. Appreciate you guys.